life is life. Life doesn't quit. I mean,
Right.
it's not all sunshine and kittens on the other side. I mean, you're
Right.
dealing with a lot of stuff and trying to heal at the same time. So, my thing for women is give yourself so much grace. Don't
Yes.
rush into another relationship. Take time to actually enjoy yourself, learn about yourself. What do I like? I haven't asked myself that question in all reality for many, many years.
Welcome to the That's Where I'm At podcast. I'm Laura, happily divorced after spending years with a narcissist. I believe keeping secrets will make you sick and that they always come to light in the end. As women, we're often told to be quiet, don't share your story, don't talk about the things we go through. It's making women sick, sad, and suicidal. We don't have to be on the other side to share our story. This show is for the women still in the middle of the mess, but showing up bravely as they heal. It's time to share these stories with each other so we can learn, grow, and heal together. I'm Laura, and that's where I'm at. Please take note that this episode may contain subjects that may be triggering to certain listeners. Please take care when listening today. Hi, guys, and welcome back to the That's Where I'm At podcast. Today I have Tina. Kristina, or Tina as her father nicknamed her, grew up in the South Pacific, the middle child of three sisters. She grew up as a missionary kid and a preacher's kid. Eventually, the family moved back to the United States, where she went to Bible school in Dallas, Texas, and ultimately met her husband. Together, they served in ministry and also owned a successful international sales business. 22 years and 4 children later, Tina filed for divorce after years of narcissism and abuse throughout the marriage. Now free, she spends her extra time, helping others come out of spiritual abuse and wants the stigma of divorce from abuse to be changed in the church mindset. Her joy is spending time with her kids and exploring the world. Welcome, Tina.
Thanks. Hi, Laura.
I'm so glad you're here. And, I like what you said, that you're helping others, with that stigma. And that's kind of how I found you on Instagram, that you talk about kind of the stigma in the church. And I had that as well. And so I was like, let's talk about it. And you said, okay. So we're going to talk about it. I just
Good.
think
It needs to be talked about a lot.
yeah, it's not talked about. And that's definitely what I do on my podcast. Is I talk about things that people tell us not to talk about. And so that's fun. And so I want to ask you first, though, after 22 years, I did 32 years. So tell me, what changed for you, or how did you notice? Did you notice like towards the end? Did you always notice? What kinds of signs did you see that you finally, after 22 years, said, I'm all done?
It's a great question, because obviously there were red flags at the beginning, but here, I'm 21 years old, getting married, crazy. And, I ignored those red flags, right? And I was very much of the belief back then that God can fix anything as long as we're Christians. And, we kind of had made this agreement. We would never talk the D word, the divorce word ever.
Yeah.
He would just figure it out. And while I think those are beautiful goals as a whole, it has to have 2 willing participants to make that work, right?
Yes.
And as my first 10 years, 11 years went on, and we had 4 kids in that time, I found I was a willing participant. Him less so. He did a lot of counseling and different things like that. He knew he had issues, but it just never took. Just the hard work after the counseling, thousands and thousands of dollars were spent. It just never took him to that next level. He couldn't make himself, whatever, lay his life down is the way I would say it.
Right.
And so what he did instead, which I don't share a lot on my Instagram, but he converted to Judaism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We met as evangelicals, non-denominational. He was Assembly of God, actually. I was non-denominational. We were in non-denominational churches predominantly. But kind of in a crisis in his life, he got converted to Judaism. And so that's kind of when, for me, I started noticing some huge changes, because he went into what I would consider as legalism from someone who
Okay.
believed in the New Testament and that we were free from the law. He all of a sudden went back into the law.
Right.
And so as a family, then we were bound to him in that way. And we spent an awful lot of time doing all the Jewish things. And that just became more and more controlling, more and more legalistic. It broke me down in every level. And I experienced more abuse when he converted that way than in the previous years before. And so, it was a tricky journey.
Do you feel like he used kind of I have to comment on the religion, not necessarily Judaism, but do you feel like he used kind of his spiritual abuse as a real thing, that people use the Bible against you, abusers will use anything they can, but do you feel like because it had some legalistic practices in comparison to us being evangelical Christians, maybe not going with the law, do you feel like he used that against you to say, like, these are things we have to do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was heavily mixed in as well with, I would say, kind of Bill Gothard, mindset.
Okay. Oh, geez.
Things had a hierarchy of, man's in charge.
Yeah.
Women comes underneath. That was definitely the structure I was not going to get out of with him.
Right.
And so, yeah, he used that heavily, that he was in charge. And then my firstborn son, very much that the man is in charge. Right at the end, we went on a trip together. I was going on a business trip. He sent my son along and said he was my covering. Now, ludicrous, but he would not budge from sending me on that trip without my 18-year-old son, 17 at the time, actually, I think, coming with me to cover me. Theologically, it just went too far. It was a control mechanism.
And for sure, that's what it is. And I mean, we know that so many different things, they use anything to control you. And just on Instagram, I had seen a girl was showing how easy it is, how easily she was controlled by her ex-narcissist. And he insisted that her fingernails be painted at all times. And she said she bought into it, right? That, he said, professional women always have these painted nails. And I commented, and it's a very easy way for him to see how controlling you or how controlled you are, to see that his control is working. Because if your nails are never chipped, he knows he can control you. That's why people don't understand. And some of these things, they may not sound like they're terrible until it's all the time and so many things that you can't even breathe without him saying, you're doing it wrong. So
no, it's heavy. It's heavy. It's heavy on me. It was heavy on the children.
Yes.
We sat for a lot of time listening to his theological talks.
Okay.
Because he was moving us from where we had been, and into the new theology. Everything had to be re-explained. Everything was, spiritual gymnastics to get us into that belief. And it was painful. And to this day, my kids struggle with a lot of heavy teaching because it's just a painful time of their lives.
Right. And so is that part of why you decided to end the marriage?
I, for me, felt like I was losing my reality and my faith. I said when I left, it was kind of 30% physical abuse, 30% verbal abuse, and the remainder 40% was the spiritual abuse. It was pretty evenly split between all of those things. That was my takeaway of where I was just like, I can't keep doing this with all of these parts in play. It's just too much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So what kinds of things were you in a different church at that time, or were you still attending, a Christian church, a non-denominational church?
We still attended a non-denominational church just because there were so few. We visited many, many messianic kind of churches.
Oh, right.
I won't get into that.
Okay.
But I still wanted my kids in regular church as well. So it was kind of a mishmash over the years. The last year we were together, we went to a regular Christian church, and that's where I, stayed for many years after that.
And then when you decided to leave, did you feel like you had support around you? Did you feel like you could talk to anyone about that?
I didn't. I had a pretty difficult and devastating situation. When I announced that I was then going to, I first asked for a separation. I asked for him to leave the house.
Okay.
I did use the word divorce, but my abused mindset, I think I said, okay, just leave the house to start with.
Right.
He would not leave the house.
Yeah.
But from that day I made that announcement, my in-laws never spoke to me again.
Oh.
They, again, believers, they completely shunned me. And then my own parents shunned me as well. They did not believe theologically I was able to leave for any reason except for sexual immorality. Abuse was not on the list. And so for them, even though they did not like my husband, they found him difficult. They found the whole Jewish thing hugely problematic. And I say Jewish, and again, I just want to clarify the religion, not the people group.
Right. Yeah.
They, because of their Christian principles, could not side with me.
Right.
And they shunned me and got rid of me as well. So did I have a lot of people around me? No. I have actually never heard of anyone who has probably walked through their divorce as alone as I was. No, that's not putting me on a pedestal. I'm sure there's many, many people that have gone through horrible things. But I had a pretty tragic situation, family-wise. Both of my sisters were overseas. It was bad.
The hard part is I feel like I didn't know about a lot of people's stories until after I started talking about mine. And so when you say you haven't heard of anybody else who's had, a divorce like yours or a situation like yours, I wonder if people aren't even talking about it, for you to even know if they do have a situation like that, to even help you. And,
probably not. I mean, did I want to tell anybody that my Christian parents had shunned me and my Christian in-laws had shunned me? Absolutely not. I mean, I didn't want to bring shame to my family. So I just kept keeping all of that shame on me, because I was embarrassed that I was going through that situation as well. I mean, I didn't want to tell anybody, and my family, my Christian family, has also completely stopped talking to me, and they intentionally shamed me.
Well, and sadly, sometimes people do think that that's okay. I know that I've, experienced the institution of marriage being held in higher esteem than the people inside of the marriage. And that's really hard, because we need to be turning our focus to the people inside the marriage and what they're experiencing, that they're being abused, physical abuse, psychological abuse. And that for me, I was slowly dying to the point where I no longer wanted to live.
Yeah.
Yet I had that thought as well, that I wasn't supposed to get divorced. Eventually, I kind of had to get over that, because I'm like, I can't live my life like this. Like, this isn't a marriage. He's off other places. He's completely shut me down. And when you break it down, was he even, and he wasn't even a Christian, but was he being a good husband in any way, shape, or form, if he is not even acknowledging that I even really exist anymore? What kind of a husband is that? So that was something I had heard. We always hear the thing about God hates divorce, right?
Yeah.
We do hear that. It's held against a lot of people. And so as I was looking into our discussion, Dr. David Clark, he's a Christian psychologist, talks about, in principle, God hates divorce, but he hates abuse worse. He allows divorce for abuse. In fact, the scripture, God hates divorce, is centered around when men were abusing women, and that they were divorcing them for no good reasons. And that's why it was said, God hates divorce. Stop divorcing your wives for nothing. Yeah. And we see how often in the Bible they were just abandoned and all these things. There's many biblical reasons to get divorced, and we're not here to promote that. What we're saying is no one should be sitting in abuse and wondering, will God still love me? Will God forgive me? Will God anything? When you are sitting in abuse, do you think that the abuse is more important than you. And it's not. God loves you more, than the
Yeah.
abuse. So
Yeah. I mean, look, I always tell people I'm so for restoration and healthy families. My conversations, my Instagram page, the
yeah.
other thing to do, I don't sit there and go, another marriage to dissolve.
Yes.
I'm like, that's not the point. But I am here to assist
Yes.
and helping people get out of a situation where, yeah, to your point, it's not about how long can a marriage last,
Yes,
and I
exactly.
think that's so often what's promoted at the church. The last couple of years, I've been visiting some churches, and I've been into several where I've happened to stumble across the marriage, conversation,
Yeah.
and it's always who's got the longest marriage, stand
Right.
up, let's see who's been married the longest. And I think, were they happily married? Were they supporting each other
Yes.
with a loving environment? Or are these people sitting at home, they'd rather be watching TV together so they don't actually have to have discussions together.
Right. Yes.
And yeah, they're married, but like, is it healthy? Is it thriving? Is there abuse on multiple different levels?
Right.
And so it's better to break that down and have healthy people than
Yes.
promoting unhealthy marriage.
I like that about having healthy people. And I think you and I had talked about how in churches, we often see double the amount of women's studies, right? Compared to men's studies, right? And
Yeah.
And my experience has been that too. You often see a lot of women's Bible studies and all these kinds of things. How to be a good wife, how to be a good mother, all these things. And not as many for men. And then also you have these marriage conferences too. And the thing is that I have learned is that 25% of Christian women are sitting in abuse. 25%, that's people who have said it and realize they're sitting in abuse. I sat in my marriage for 32 years and didn't realize until about year 29 or 30 that I was in abuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I thought just my husband was a jerk. And and everybody's like, well, just keep praying for him. So I did stay and pray for a long time. I just stayed and stayed and stayed. I'm not saying I would have wanted to be divorced. I never thought I would be divorced. I just thought if we could work these things out, if he would just understand what he's saying to me, and it's not nice and it's not kind, if he would only realize, but listen, he's a grown man. You think he doesn't understand? He understood what he was doing. And when I finally realized that is when I became okay with the fact that I had to end my marriage, because I don't think I was going to be alive any longer. I was so sad. I was so depressed.
Yeah.
Being in that place.
I don't know if we hope they understand, right? We think we've explained it enough, and we've shared enough, and we've cried enough, and they've heard enough sermons and all of that kind of stuff. But
yes,
here's the thing about narcissists: they don't get it. They have an inability to change. They don't experience empathy.
Yes.
I think without empathy, you almost can't get anything, right? That's the caring for each other, carrying each other's burden.
Yes. Yes.
Actually having compassion, multiple fruits of the spirit, I think are bundled up in empathy, right? And since a narcissist has no empathy, there's an inability to change.
Yes.
Even if we think it's being laid out logically and they can go to therapy or whatever, if someone is not recognizing that they have a problem, and or the pride and ego so big, which we know narcissism comes out of that, right? Someone who can't stop looking at their own reflection, admiring themselves. So even that, I kind of give narcissists grace in the sense that they're handicapped in some ways. It's a character emotional handicap, but it's a handicap, and in that way I want to free women sooner. Again, getting back to that thing, how long can I stay in this marriage? I want to free women sooner so they can recognize it faster, understand that this won't change. Ooh, I need to get out. I can fix this quickly. I can not have any more kids with this guy, or,
Yes.
I can
Yes.
protect my children. There's multiple things that's why I speak out. It's so important to get that message across. And it's not just men that are narcissists. There's lots
Right.
of women narcissists. I just find it's predominantly male
Yeah, it
oriented.
is. It's
But
predominantly that. But yes, women can be narcissists as well.
yeah,
And I like what you said, that that's why you speak out. And that's why I started speaking out, because I felt very alone. I felt very confused, because all the years I just kept trying and I didn't realize, because even if I would have heard the word narcissist, which frankly I think I did, but I wasn't meant to hear it at the time, that I didn't really understand what he was doing, because I really just thought I just have to explain myself a little bit better, because of course being gaslit for so many years, that if you would just, I don't understand anything you're saying, he would tell me. And so I would try harder to explain myself. And then the other thing that was a concern was, we were in therapy off and on a lot of times for different things. But the domestic violence hotline in America does not recommend that, because unfortunately sometimes they can be manipulative. And when you have that kind of usually in abuse, they are more controlling, that kind of thing. It can get dangerous. For me, I ended up getting gaslit by our therapist, who said that he was very handsome, and what did I have to complain about? And yeah. And
oh,
so I know, I'm telling you, like, when I think back, I'm like, I just even couldn't believe it. And by that point though, I thought I'm done. Like, I'm completely done. Like, she just put the nail in the coffin, because if he can charm her, there was no winning anything. And I was sitting there going, and he would literally stand up from therapy and leave, and then go off and do whatever he wanted to do with whoever he wanted to do. And the thing we have to remember is, if we allow it, and this isn't anything, our friendships, our children, if we allow it, if we continue to allow it, then they think it's okay. And so I often allowed a lot of things in hopes that he would see I was a great person, and he would stay, and he would change. And we know that they don't change. He would often tell me that there was nothing to change, right? And so they don't think that there's anything to work on, and that's part of the issue.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing, is if they don't even think that they have any concerns, they will flip it all back to you and gaslight you, and that's the hard part. And why I felt so alone for so long. And one of the things that Dr. David Clark was talking about is all these things. It's like, the things that our ex-husbands did to us are not okay, and actually biblically grounds for us to leave. That they just were like, I'm just gonna, I'm dissatisfied with you. I'm gonna mistreat you. That's biblical. That's in the Bible. That's in Deuteronomy, where
Yeah.
men were doing that. Men were like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm leaving. And it even says in the Bible that, give her a certificate of divorce because you're chronically abusing her. Like,
Mhm.
and it's just, to me, it makes me sad, because I know I have a friend who went to our pastor. Well, he was my pastor at one point, and she said, I'm leaving my husband, and he's been psychologically abusing me for years. And he said, you don't have grounds for divorce because he's not hitting you. And she said, well, I'm leaving anyway. And he said, well, you're in luck, because God will still forgive you and you can repent. And that was the most disturbing thing to me, just
Yeah.
because she's not being hit. When in the Bible, I couldn't even write all the scriptures. I started to write them, and I'm like, okay, I get it. There's a million scriptures. Dr. David Clark is amazing. He talks about it all the time, because he's a Christian psychologist, and he writes books about this kind of stuff. He has a great book called I Didn't Want a Divorce. Now What? You know what I mean? He talks about that, because there's women like us who didn't want to get divorced, but now we're stuck in that. So, oh my gosh. So what kinds of things, once you got a divorce, did you do to heal, and what do you think helped you?
I didn't heal immediately, to be
No,
honest.
no.
I spent
I can imagine. No.
years and years and years actually still being psychologically abused by my ex
Okay.
then. And I think that was because we shared custody of our children.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have had 100% custody. I was very much bullied into 50-50. Again, healthy me wishes I could go back and change a lot of things, but
Yes.
you can't. I was doing the best I could at the time. So the first 3 years, I was hanging on by my fingernails. I don't even know if I was healing. I mean, I'm sure I was, but I focused less on me and more on my kids. I think they were under 18. My oldest, by the time the divorce came through, he was 18, so he no longer fit into the parenting plan that was given by the state. He actually exclusively went off with his dad and never to come back, actually, which is really my other three. Because of that, my other three, then the younger ones, I really, really spent a considerable amount of time and most of my money, honestly, in parenting them. I didn't work. I stayed home. I had an eBay business that I ran, but my biggest concern was finishing parenting them well.
Yes.
And, I attempted to do that. So at the 5-year mark, my ex-husband then got remarried, and that made a huge difference. Once he didn't have
because he had somebody else to focus on.
New supply. And while it broke my heart,
yes,
I mean, it was night and day difference of what I was experiencing. So once that happened, I think the healing started. And my kids were 5 years older, and I started to do a lot more personal development. I did a Bob Proctor course on renewing my mind and believing positive things and changing my mindset. I did another coaching course, for my mind, training my mind. I knew I needed to change my DNA. And I say that because my DNA was one that sucked in all that abuse. I was and still am, but an empath. And I just took so much on board. And my mother was narcissistic. And, we could talk about that probably on another episode. But I say I married a familiar spirit. I married. The way I was raised and treated led me to the man I married.
Yes.
And so when I say I needed to change my DNA, I needed to change that place in me that accepted that behavior, that accepted that as normal, and thought that's what I deserved. And so that took a lot of reprogramming. And yes, the word will renew your mind, but I was in the word for years. I did some complete other things to check. I needed the power of positive thinking, and I needed to believe bigger things for myself, and I needed to do affirmations and, change my mindset. So I would say I read a lot of business, personal development books. And that really helped me.
I love that you say that, because I've had so many discussions on this podcast, because let me tell you, I have done everything from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I have done so many things, not just, I really, really pressed into God. Like, please tell me who you think I am. Like, I know you told me before, but start telling me more. And I kind of lived off of that. I lived off the scriptures, like he will never leave you or forsake you, those kinds of things to remind me that God was there for me. But I started doing holistic healing, talking to coaches, really focusing on my business, like you said, because you want to start dreaming again, don't you? And that's how I was starting to feel. People don't realize, and I don't know if you were in this situation, but I was not really allowed to do anything. Like, he didn't want me, and they don't want you bigger than they are, more successful.
Right. Absolutely not.
No.
I was to that point, I would say to him for years before I finally left, I'd be like, you are a 1,000-watt light bulb. And I'm a 200-watt light bulb, and you will not dim yourself to allow me to shine. And I said, so my whole life, I'm living being outshone by you on every dimension, and it makes me feel, weak and unloved and invaluable. And so that was, the big, to your point, they have to be the biggest, the brightest, the front and center of everything.
And the hard part is, and this is part of the manipulation. So if this is happening to you, please hear us, that in therapy, when we would go, I would say, like, he doesn't support me with, I wanted to change careers. And in 2020, when the shutdown, I decided to no longer be a speech therapist. My mom had passed away, things like that. And he's like, I fully support her in therapy. He told me this. And he told the therapist, because I really wanted someone else to hear it. Yes, she can start her own business, all those things. And when I did at home, he would just bully me. Like, you need to make more money. You need to get a better job, all these things. And I would like try to make more money and do better things. And it was never good enough because it's never good enough. And
Yeah.
so they will often talk out both sides of their mouth. Really, at home, they're going to abuse you. And while in public, they maybe will tell other people, she's great. I'm so proud of her and her business. And then I'm like, really? Because at home, you don't tell me that. And so that was one of the things I hired my friend who's a wellness coach, and I asked her, I said, I don't know what this means, but this is what's in my heart. I want to dream again. I don't know what that means. And she said, okay. And she actually helped me dream up the podcast. It was something that came out of that. But there's such a deep desire because you're so oppressed, right? That you don't want to dream. Did you feel like that when you were going through all these business, books and all these things, that you felt like, I want to dream again and do something else?
Definitely. I mean, I was a little lost, I have to say.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Get married at 21. I did not go to college. I did a lot of business things, but we ended up having a business together for 20 years. And that was tricky because when he, finally got out of here, he pushed me out of the business and bought me out and undervalued it and gave me, much less for the business than what it deserved, what it, was worth.
Yeah.
It left me in a very lost place. So I've had to spend a lot of time dreaming about what I want, what do I expect out of life. And, honestly, it hasn't come quickly. It's been a journey. And I've ended up in sales, which I enjoy. And I've ended up meeting a lot of different people and doing a lot of different things. But yeah, it's, to dream is to have your life back. And that's a beautiful thing,
Are you feeling trapped in a relationship that leaves you questioning your worth and sanity? Have you noticed the red flags and decided you can't live one more day in a toxic environment? Whether you've just left or are considering leaving a narcissistic partner, the book, Married to a Nice Guy, Getting Over Narcissistic Abuse, is here to guide and support you. In this candid memoir, I share my 33-year struggle in a marriage to a nice guy that was marked by emotional manipulation and abuse, revealing how I broke free and reclaimed my life. If you've been waiting for a sign, this book is it. If you've ever felt isolated, confused, or hopeless in your relationship, Married to a Nice Guy, Getting Over Narcissistic Abuse offers the understanding and guidance you need to break free and start your journey to healing. You are not alone, and you deserve a life filled with love, respect, and happiness. Order your copy today and take the first step towards reclaiming your life. I want to ask you if you felt like I did, that once you were out of the house and really under the constant abuse, if you felt like you started to get clarity, even if you didn't know exactly what that meant. There were days where I was like, oh, I feel like I can actually think and make decisions. And they weren't always easy decisions. I know that I really ignorantly thought, I'm going to get rid of the problem and then things are going to be great. What a farce that was, And so that's why I started doing this podcast. I'm like, oh, that's not what happens. No, I'm 18 months out. I'm still healing. He's already moved on. He's got remarried, and I'm over here. That's the problem. Narcissists find their new supply. And victims of narcissists find themselves. That's what we do.
Right. And that's, people post that a lot, but it's never have there been truer words.
Yes.
And, when you've stayed together with a spouse, decades, as we both did, you don't even realize what an abused mindset you're living in. I tell people it was death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
It's true.
It's just painful enough that you notice it, but it's not enough that you've gone to the hospital or, that you've told a lot of people about it. It's terrible at that moment, right? It's just happening layer upon layer. And then that creates a whole crusted mindset. And as I was getting out of my marriage, oh man, I was so unclear in my thinking. And this happens to a lot of women as well from narcissists. They'll say, you're losing your mind. You don't remember stuff. You don't remember way that it actually happened. And then he would tell the kids, your mom's losing her mind.
I hated that when I found that out.
Yeah, that was repeated hundreds of times to my children. And then I started thinking, my
Yes.
mother actually has Alzheimer's, right? So,
Yes.
I started thinking, what is happening to me?
Right.
Clarity actually takes a long time to come, I believe. It has to lift and dissipate off you, and you walk into clarity.
Yes.
For me, I woke up out of my life. I think in order
Yes.
to cope, I had put myself in a semi-coma. I was disassociating all the time.
Yes.
And so you come back online and actually take control of my life. That's a huge project. And something, I hear a lot of women say, I'm so tired. Yeah, you're tired.
Yes.
Your body is completely recalibrating. Your mindset is being completely changed. All of a sudden, you've got freedom. You've got liberty to look at life the way it exactly is. And life is life. Life doesn't quit. I mean,
Right.
it's not all sunshine and kittens on the other side. I mean,
Right.
you're dealing with a lot of stuff and trying to heal at the same time. So, my thing for women is give yourself so much grace.
Yes.
Don't rush into another relationship. Take time to actually enjoy yourself, learn about yourself. What do I like? I haven't asked myself that question in all reality for many, many years. And then I think if you've got kids as a mother, you're constantly pushing yourself to the side anyway to help your
Yes,
kids,
exactly.
right?
I mean, we really do have that issue, and then it's not helped sometimes in certain circles that you run, or like say a church culture or something like that. But I do have grown children, and I went full no contact immediately because I knew I didn't want to find out about the next person,
Yeah.
which I knew was going to happen. And actually, they were together immediately and introduced her to my children. Like, oh, them's fighting words. I mean, that,
Yeah.
it was hard, but my kids, respected I was going to go no contact. I didn't want to know about dad. And that was hard, but now we all talk about it, and two of them just don't have a relationship with him anymore because as 30 and 28-year-olds, they just see him as the man he is now rather than their dad, and they're like, who is this guy? They don't know who he is. And that's the thing I think women don't realize when you are in abuse. I think we were protecting him. I'm sure you may have been doing that as well, protecting his image, maybe not telling certain stories so they didn't look bad and your marriage didn't sound terrible. I know I was doing that. And so I did ask the kids at one point, what's it like hanging out with dad? This is when they were still speaking to him, what's it like hanging out with him without me? Because I feel like I was a buffer. And they go, yeah, you really were, because he doesn't even know how to talk to us, anything.
Yeah. No, I mean, my ex doesn't know how to plan anything. He doesn't know how to,
Right.
do anything to put life together, right? I mean, the moment I finally got away from him, I mean, he immediately hired a housekeeper and hired someone to clean the house. So someone did all of his laundry, someone did his cooking,
Oh
and
my gosh.
cleaning. So, I mean, he had the money to do that, right? But I was replaced. It still didn't make him a better parent. He still was selfish enough to always want to be on the phone or taking trips. I mean, any week that he didn't have the kids, he was in the town. He never handled a crisis. He never took them to get a haircut or the dentist or, some of the bigger things. When my kid's car would break down on the side of the highway, he was out of town. I was the one.
You're the one. Well, and I still feel like I'm doing a lot of those kinds of things, and I'm okay with it, because the narrative, of course, was that mom is crazy, like you had talked about, and that I thought my kids hated me. And so where I'm at now with these kids, like we've had so much healing. They apologize for participating in the gaslighting because they participated with dad, and we've had so much healing. I've apologized to them for the reactive abuse I've had. So reactive abuse is when you're being abused and then you react, and you may react out of character, or maybe at that time it is your character because you're being pushed to the limit and you get angry or whatever. And I just know that I was very frustrated, very sad. I think I had postpartum depression on top of, but who knows if I did or if I was just being manipulated and abused to the point where I thought I had postpartum depression, because he did tell me, well, you wanted this life, so you're going to have to figure out how to manage your time. And It was like, well, I just need help with the baby. Well, you wanted it, so you're going to have to figure it out kind of thing. I know.
Yeah.
He's such a great guy. And whatever. And these are the things I never told anybody. You know what it's like?
Yeah,
Now I'm
well,
telling her.
you know what? You don't know how overwhelming that is at the time. I mean,
Yes.
you just kind of have to take it, right? What else are you going to do?
What are you going to do? I mean, you have a newborn. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's tough.
It's really hard. And so one of the other things that with when you see, if you are listening to this and you have an ex that goes off and gets a new partner right away, just realize that many times if they are a narcissist, then they need that. They want to find someone immediately because they can't be alone. They can't, because it's such a shame-based disorder that they can't be alone with their own thoughts or anything. And oftentimes, like in my case, she was waiting in the wings so that he never had to stop for 1 hour and be alone. He didn't have to be alone ever. And so on the outside, it may look like it's all great and all, but listen, it's not. It's their issue. It has nothing to do with you. You just stopped following the rules, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's right. You started waking up to the reality of what was happening to you and realizing that line has been crossed. I can't live this way anymore.
Yes.
Something needs to change. I've been violated. I mean, that for me was the big thing. The
Yes.
first time I was pushed, first time I was absolutely screamed at, I think was in my
Yes.
first week of marriage. Actually, I got absolutely screamed at for not buying bacon. And
Oh
he
my Lord.
reminded me, and I grew up without bacon in my house. My mother didn't like it, so
Okay.
it wasn't ever top of mind for me.
Yeah.
I didn't eat bacon and eggs for breakfast. And I forgot the bacon, and he screamed at me and I thought, what is happening? Like,
Right. Right.
what is happening?
Right.
First paper cut, right? But, you start getting violated more and more on the bigger things. And
Right.
you begin to wake up, hopefully, and realize this life shouldn't be like this.
And that's a good question to ask. I know I've had friends who have started taking notes, like journaling about, okay, he seems to do this and this and this, because I never really, actually, when I go back and read my journals now, I can see a pattern.
Yeah.
And it's very sad. I want to go wake up. But I was the same way. I was 22 when we met, and I was 23 when we got married. And so, we're young. We don't even have a full functioning brain, and so I have to give that 23-year-old girl some grace. She just wanted to be loved. I understand that. I look back at that young Laura, and I know I've done a lot. I've done some inner child work. I know why I chose him, and I just wanted to be loved. And so I get it. And we have to give ourselves grace on that for sure. And also give ourselves grace for the time it's taking to heal. There is no time frame on that. The other thing that I think, I don't know if you experience this, is the trauma bond and almost being like you love him and you hate him kind of all in one breath, and how that feels in your body. Did you experience that?
It sounds weird, but I probably had more of a trauma bond with his mother.
Oh, interesting.
He reeled me into the relationship because of his mother. He
Okay.
was his mom and her very effervescent, loving personality. She's also a narcissist, but didn't know that at the time,
Right.
or at least an enabler. Raising her son as a narcissist.
Yes.
But she treated me in every way how I wanted my own mother to treat me. She lavished me with gifts. She would hug me every time. She would give me stuff. She would chat with me. She would take care of the children if I asked, like all of the things that, I desperately, desperately wanted and was not raised with. So when I was thinking about leaving my husband, that was a very, very hard decision to go, I'm going to pull away from this family that I have, given so much time of my life to, and treated me, even though I began to wake up to there was generational abuse happening from his side of the family. I hated giving up my mother-in-law. That was tough. That was really tough.
That's so interesting. And I could totally see that. I have one of his sisters. I really like her. And I actually was thinking about her yesterday. I'm like, maybe I'll just text her. And I was like, no, don't do it. I mean, I really did cut everybody off. I sent letters to everybody saying, thank you for being great in-laws. That was with an eye roll to my actual in-laws because because in Alien, where the queen alien, yeah, that's his mom. Because she was the queen narcissist.
My mother-in-law too, right? Yeah. But it was filling a void in me.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good point that I think we need to give ourselves grace on that too, because when we see it, when you see it, you can't unsee it. But
that's 100% true.
And at the time, though, you needed it. I needed it because let me tell you, my mother-in-law treated me very kindly in many ways until a little while later. And then she started saying stuff when no one else was in the room. She was gaslighting me because she would say these things. And I would say to my husband, your mom just said the rudest thing to me. No, you probably didn't realize what she was saying. She was probably kidding. And then one day he caught her. And so then we addressed it. But it was always like that. And so when I wrote everybody a letter and was like, thanks for being great in-laws. I wish you nothing but the best. I was like, not really. And then, and then she sent a letter back. If you watch The Crown, it was very similar to what the queen said to Diana. And she was, I hope you're happy now. And she literally wrote that in the card to me. And I thought, well, yeah, I got rid of your son. I'm really happy. Thanks.
Just lost 175 pounds off of my back.
So I'm friends with my divorce mediator. We just became friends during the divorce. She's a great person, and we just kind of connected after.
Yeah,
and so awesome. Now we're actually friends. And I always said, yeah, I lost 190 pounds. And she's like, no, you got to say of dead weight.
It's all right.
It's so true. Anyway, gosh, we got off on some tangents, but these are good things to, talk about because healing is not linear. That's for sure. It's going to take some time, but I really like the things you talk about on your Instagram. And I know that you talk to people in your DMs and stuff. And I really appreciate you really talking about it. And so I want to encourage people to really talk about these things and don't just maybe do a little bit of research, right? Like the things about a Christian marriage and that God hates divorce, and a lot of places were stopping there. And I was like, but I think there's more to it. And I'm not going to live my life in shame because one scripture, we can't take one scripture out of context anyway. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be reading the Bible if that's what we believe and really thinking about it and talking about it. Because it was hard. And then that I've just come across some things. One of the things for me, and maybe you can speak about this, we don't have to go too far into it, but one of the things I've had a hard time with is forgiveness. I believe I've forgiven them. But one of the things I found was at the very beginning of my divorce, people wanted me to, if you just forgive him, you'll be healed and everything will be great and you can walk forward and everything will be just sunshine and roses. And I'm like, holy guacamole. Forgiveness is a big thing. And forgiveness after abuse could be even bigger for some people. It may or may not happen. And if you want it to happen, great, because it's for us. It's not for them. You never have to say that you forgive them, or you don't have to forget. And you sure don't have to reconcile if you don't want to. For me, I feel like it's going to take a lot of times forgiving and on my knees, maybe at the altar, those kinds of things. And how have you dealt with that?
It's a great question because it's a moving target, right?
Yeah.
To your point. I mean, have I forgiven him? I can unequivocally say yes.
Okay.
Do I work out my forgiveness still daily? Yes.
Yes. I love
it. I'm going to say in my heart I've forgiven him because I make that declaration and I choose with everybody to walk in forgiveness. I have instituted boundaries. I have decided that I'm going to tell the truth. I have had to navigate multiple situations that have created brand new wounds and brand new issues that I have to deal with. It is not a dead dog. It is a living person over there who creates waves. And so, you have to constantly walk in forgiveness. I constantly have to make the choice to surrender myself, create a new boundary, move forward, and it's tricky. It does not happen overnight. There's multiple levels of the mind, of the physical body, of the spirit that you have to work through. And so, I ultimately make a choice to forgive, but that happens in so many different ways.
Yes.
It's not a fast process.
It's not. So I'm so glad you said that. And that was a great description. I love it because it doesn't have to be a one and done. Yeah. And that doesn't mean we're failing at it. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
That was really the impetus of me to start the podcast, because a lot of people said, well, don't talk about this anymore. Stop talking about it. And then just forgive him. And then you'll be great. Everything. And I was like, okay, no, I think I'll pick up a microphone and talk about it louder. because
That's right.
Well, because I felt like it continued sort of, let's say, the quote unquote abuse from church of, okay, stay and pray. Okay, now you're divorced. Okay, but now you have to forgive, and you should forgive him for everything he did and then move on. And I felt like that all of that was toxic to me and hurting people, not just women. I felt like it was hurting people. Why are we worrying about what I'm doing forgiveness wise? Why are you not worrying about what he's doing abuse wise? And that to me, I felt like was a missing link. And so I can only do what I can do on this side, and I can help women. That's my focus is women, but of course, fill in whatever you need here. But that, however I can help women, and like you are doing, to understand if this is the relationship you are in and it doesn't seem like it's okay to not be in it anymore. You deserve more than that, so.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, I think we talked about everything. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we said goodbye?
Oh gosh. I mean, we could talk about this for a decade, honestly.
We could.
One of the things I love is sharing stories because I just shared a reel a couple of days ago, and I'd forgotten actually about that story, but Apple popped up and gave me a little replay of some photos from like 6 years ago. And it was those photos of a snowstorm. And I went, all of a sudden I remembered, I wished my ex-husband had come over and just surprised me one day and snowplowed my driveway.
Yep.
And I created that story again and put it out on Instagram, because it jogged my memory, right? And so, we could talk endlessly about little things and expectations and failures and all of that kind of stuff. But, I want women to know, and I know this is your heart, is to know that they're loved, they are accepted, they have not upset God. Nothing is God's reach. Nothing is out of his realm of possibility to transform and change a life. And I've had to comfort myself in that. I've had to comfort myself in that, my kids have been damaged, but they're not lost. And God's just as interested in redeeming them and bringing them into their destiny as he is me. And, I think for anyone listening to this podcast, you may be going through the absolutely deepest, darkest waters right now, but there is hope and redemption on the other side.
Yes.
And, my life is living proof. My life is far from perfect. There's so many things on my list. I journal and I talk to God and I go, okay, I've still got this huge list of things I need to, right?
Right.
Because that's just life and normal things. But my life is so much better than what it was. My kids' lives are better. And, there's good things ahead.
I love that. That's a great way to end. I love that. Where can everybody find you on Instagram?
You can find me at k.ravenhill. That's where I do most of my communicating. If you go into the link in my bio, there is a place where you can send me your email, and I'm starting to send out, more personalized correspondence to people that are for that. So that's great. Instagram was down today, just if anything happened, I want to lose touch with people. So I'm asking to connect through email. And yeah, it'd be great to continue to build community.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. And we'll put everything in the show notes. And guys, if anything resonated with you today, we're going to have some stuff in the show notes. And of course, go right now to Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. And also you can go to social media and comment on our stuff and let us know you enjoyed it. So Podcast Land knows you love us and want us to continue what we're doing. So thank you, Tina, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today on the That's Where I'm At podcast. Did the story today resonate with you? Do you think others would benefit from hearing the stories we are telling? Please go to Apple or Spotify right now to leave a review so everyone in podcast land will know you love the show. We want to continue sharing stories of hope and healing. I'll be back next time. I'll talk to you then.